So, Dr. Margalit is a professor in the School of Mathematics at Georgia Tech. He received his BS in math at Brown and his MS and PhD at the University of Chicago as well in mathematics. He then spent 2 years as an assistant professor at Tufts University before coming to Georgia Tech. He's received the NSF Career Award and the Sloan Fellowship and was the inaugural recipient of the Leddy Family Faculty Fellowship at Georgia Tech. His current research is in the intersection of low-dimensional topology and geometric group theory. I've heard through the grapevine that you can actually find Dr. Margalit strumming his guitar during class, so make sure you sign up for his classes while you're an undergrad. And he even participates in stand-up comedy shows as a comedian at the Atlanta Science Festival. So without further ado, here's Dr. Margalit.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alexandra. Thanks for inviting me here. It's good to be here. I'm talking at a computer with a blank screen, but I guess I'm supposed to get used to that. It's good to see everyone. Thanks, Alexandra, again for the great introduction. I want to talk about how to do well in math classes at Georgia Tech. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. There was none of the people in that picture of me. Those are pictures of my kids. I have a daughter named Lily, and she's 11. She turned 11 2 days ago. And that's Simon, her little brother. He's 7. And yeah, we went on a trip to the mountains this weekend and did a little hiking. I've been at Georgia Tech for 10 years. So I think I'm supposed to get my gold watch this year, which is great. Excited. What else? I love teaching. I love doing math. I play music sometimes, like Alexandra said. So I like cake, chocolate cake. Those are some of the big things, I guess. I have some sort of specific pieces of advice that I can share with you. Hopefully they're helpful in kind of navigating your way through Georgia Tech, and especially your math classes, but maybe your other classes as well.
It's Christina. I was just going to get us started with a question while folks were writing in. This is week 2 of a short session and week 2 of a virtual short session. So any initial advice for doing well in this virtual environment?
Yeah, the virtual environment is, it's difficult for some people, and it's, sort of better for other people than even being on campus. One thing that's easier is you don't have to haul your way around campus to get to different office hours. So one of the things I'll definitely emphasize a lot is going to office hours. But since you don't, since it's very easy to just pop in, I assume your instructors are having office hours. That's one thing that is even easier with the online format. So go to office hours. I'll say more about that. Another thing I would say is, even though it's online, and even though it's tempting to sleep in and watch the recording later, or you've got something else going on, you'll just watch the recording later. Another thing I'm going to touch on is just being an active participant in class. And so the best way to do that is to be there while it's happening, and try to stay focused and try to ask questions. So I think for the students in my class, we went virtual in the middle of the semester. The students who went sort of more downhill, I think it correlated a lot with them not going to class anymore, and trying to catch up later. I see Archie's asking about math research. I can definitely talk about that. So I can just say kind of generally about research at Georgia Tech is there's a lot going on for undergraduates to do research with faculty. Many faculty are excited to have undergraduates work with them. The hardest part is reaching out. So if there's a particular professor, you're interested in, or you like their work, just ask them what's an opportunity, what can I do if I want to do research in your area? There is also, I forget the name, maybe somebody here knows, there is an office, at least I think in the College of Science and maybe more broadly, there is a team of undergraduates that helps undergraduates get in touch with faculty researchers. I'm blanking on the name of that organization. UROP, okay, Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program. They have a website. You can fill out, hey, I'm a first-year student, this is my background, here are my interests, and they will do a lot of the legwork of finding someone, they'll have a list of people in math and other subjects that are looking for students and the kind of projects that they're working on. And there's the link. Thanks, Alexandra. So, so basically the answer to your question, Archie, is there's tons of opportunities. It's been a lot easier to find the opportunities now that this UROP exists and has really been active, especially recently. But my biggest advice is, don't be afraid to approach professors, to go to this website and approach them. You get a lot out of it. Just, it's really get a lot. College is about, really expanding your horizons, and doing research is a great way to do that. It also is helpful no matter what you want to do after, especially if you want to go into research or graduate school. It helps a lot to have, that sort of deeper work that you do when you're doing research. I'm highlighting two PDF files where that I put on my Math 1553 webpage, just advice on doing well in math classes. One of them is by Katie Mann, a friend of mine who's in my field, and she's at Cornell. And she wrote some piece of advice, and I kind of added on to it. Are URA and UROP associated?
Yeah, they are. The URA are the ambassadors that you were talking about. So those are the students that help you find the research. And then UROP is the office name. And then we've got some Q&A coming in on the right over here.
Yes, I see.
How to excel in college level math.
I mean, have I taught high school level math? Not exactly, but I can tell you the difference just because I teach first year students at Georgia Tech all the time. And especially linear algebra versus calculus, but I'll say college versus high school. The biggest difference, it's just like history, right? In history, when you're younger, it's a lot of like, writing down the countries on the map of the USSR, or what used to be the USSR. And then eventually you actually start like learning to think critically about things. Math is very similar. A lot of the things that you're doing in high school is a list of recipes, and you're supposed to get good at following, like division, right? Dividing to, a 3-digit number by a 2-digit number, whatever. And you learn the recipe and you do lots of examples, and then on the test, you're supposed to just do the recipe again. College, and especially linear algebra, which I teach a lot, it just doesn't cut it anymore, because you really have to like absorb this new material, and you have to be able to think critically about it. And you're actually not going to be asked to do the recipes at all. Now that we're on this online format, we used to ask some of the recipes on the test, but we realized for this online thing, we don't have online proctoring. And so asking a recipe is silly, because you can just ask, your internet browser to do the problem for you. And so it's just about understanding. And that's hard for a lot of students, because they come in and they focus on getting the recipes, and they don't focus on the bigger understanding. So I want to give some tips for how to do that, but that's the big difference. It's a pretty big jump. Oh, and so an anonymous asked, is it possible to excel at math through muscle memory, even if you don't understand the concept? The answer is no. Maybe for calculus, maybe. For linear algebra, the answer is absolutely no, especially if in the online format. If it's something that a computer can do, we will not ask it, at least not in the online version. Even if it's in person, we'll ask very few of those questions. And so I want to talk a little bit about, today, like, what does that mean? How do you go about math if you're not just, learning these recipes that you learned in high school, or in the same way that you learned them in high school? Okay, another question, and I'll be addressing all these things. You've heard that math class, so the second question in the Q&A, you've heard that math classes at Georgia Tech are hard. It's hard, but it's not hard, in the sense everybody can do it. I think there's this feeling like some people can't do it. That's the difference is, and I keep coming back to the exact same point, is if you're used to doing recipes and you're not going to spend the time to like think about the new ideas and let them sit in your head and think about them from different ways, and you're insisting that you want the class to be recipes, it's going to be hard. So, but there's also not hard in that the exams, they don't test, like the exams aren't designed for someone who's been doing math for 20 years. They're designed for someone who started taking the class like a month ago. And so if you stay up with it, the exams are totally doable. linear algebra, which is probably the hardest one for first years. We usually give about 40% A's. So yes, it might be hard, but it's not like, everybody's failing the class. Linear algebra prior to calc, it's totally fine. It's totally independent, but you have to be ready to learn that, math that isn't recipes. It's just a totally new idea. So you can do it. You don't need any calculus. Some people suggest taking calculus because it's like a confidence booster, because a lot of people, if you've taken calculus already, it's kind of, something you're used to. So there's no reason you can't do it. There's no reason you can't just start off with linear algebra. But the thing is, you have to, with linear algebra, you have to understand the concepts and definitions, and you can't get behind. You can get behind, but then it's harder. So go into it knowing that you're going to work hard. A big mistake people make, I think, is that linear algebra, the class I teach, is 2 credits, and you're like, oh, I could take 10 of those because that's only 20 hours a week. It's a 2-credit class, but treat it like a 4-credit class or 3. I don't know, but it's not. The fact that it's 2 credits, you're not going to get by doing half as much work. It's 2 credits kind of for reasons that are too hard to explain and not worth explaining. It's called a 2-credit class. Don't think of it that way. It is difficult. It only meets twice a week, yes, but you will have to work on it. Okay, so don't go into thinking you're going to squeeze it in and then get upset in the middle of the semester when it's taking you a long time to keep up. Is it possible to get an A in all math classes? Yes, absolutely. If you got into Georgia Tech, you can absolutely do the classes. Now you have to do work. You have to come to office hours. You can't get behind. You can't wait until the night before the test to study. Absolutely every single student can get an A in my class and the other Georgia Tech math class. I mean, the thing is, it feels like this infinite amount of information the teacher's throwing at you. It's always boils down to a small number of things. You just have to learn them. Key thing is to remember it's really a small amount of pieces of information. But if you get behind, it starts to feel like a lot. Is higher level math more dependent on logic and problem solving than just memorizing? The answer is yes. In linear algebra, for example, the goal is to understand the concept and the idea. You also need to memorize. I'm going to say a little bit about that. But it's I want to come back to that. But yes, you won't be just memorizing is not the right way to think about it. You need to be good at writing proofs for 1553. The answer is no. You're not going to write a single proof in the class, so that's good. Don't worry about that. But you cannot just focus on computation. And it's not a specific question. That's a great, great question. You need to be able to think critically about the ideas and really understand the definitions. So in calculus, right, you learn what continuous means. It's got some definitions, something with epsilons, deltas, whatever. But then you forget about it, and you're supposed to just do some computations, right? In linear algebra, especially, even compared to calculus, that's not enough. You need to know the definitions. You're not going to be writing proofs, but you'll be asked questions that test whether you really understood the definition. So, but I like the question because I think that's where people get behind in linear algebra, is you come in thinking, okay, I'm going to hammer out these recipes as well as I can and just forget about everything else. I'm not going to get that. The answer to that is no. You have to come in trying to master the material. And you can all do it. You got into Georgia Tech, you absolutely can do it. What should you do if you get behind? Catching back up, I would say, here's the thing, 2 things. One is you should come to office hours as much as you can, okay? And I think there's a little bit at Georgia Tech, there's a feeling like professors don't even want you at office hours or something like that. You absolutely should be going to office hours. And that's the best way to catch up. And the way to do it is just figure out each lecture has somewhere between 2 and 5 ideas in it. Learn those 5 ideas, and you have to just go section by section, lecture by lecture, and do them one at a time, right? In any project you're doing in life, you chunk it into pieces, and lectures chunk the material into pieces. So just do them one at a time. You can do 1 a day, and then you'll catch up because you're going twice as fast as the lecture is. I've struggled with technical critical thinking through my education. I learn much slower than my peers. Great question. someone finds to learn at a slower pace or start building confidence. The very first thing about this is, and it sounds like Ashley, there may be a specific learning disorder there, which I'm not familiar with, but just I can only speak in generality. A big mistake that every single person in the world makes is to think that other people are learning it faster than you. And it may be in some cases that, there may be a learning disorder. Again, I'm not an expert. But anyway, in general, everybody makes that mistake. The other people around me are getting it quicker than me. For the most part, it's not true. I'm a professional mathematician. I feel slower than the people around me when I'm, among my peers. It's just that is natural human behavior, human instinct. So the first thing is don't compare yourself to other people. And if you see yourself thinking other people are smarter or better, you're probably wrong. The thing to do is you want to be having a conversation with people. So another common thing is what you're used to in high school is the teacher explains it and you absorb it, and then hopefully you can repeat similar examples for your homework and your exams. For college level math, the thing that everybody needs, pretty much everybody needs, is interaction. So it's one of the things on my piece of advice. So and this is why I love office hours so much. Somebody explains to you an idea, you should try to explain it back. Okay? If you learn one thing from this, should we go to office hours and explain it back? Say, can I please explain that back to you, professor? And because what happens is you hear an idea and you think you understand it, but this happens to me all the time. I'm a professor, I'm a mathematician, a research mathematician, and it's my job to learn math. And a lot of times someone explains something to me, and I think I understood it, and then I open my mouth and try to explain it back, and nothing comes out. And so the best thing you can do is take it upon yourself to, try to explain it back to either your professor or your TA or your friend. And that back and forth, you can pinpoint much more quickly what part you don't understand. You might realize I can't even put the words in the correct order to form a sentence, the correct math sentence. Or you might, realize, oh, there's this one part I didn't understand, and someone can help you work through that. So that's a great question, Ashley. Hopefully I helped touch on that. Archie, yes.
Yeah. I was just wondering, so as far as the problems go on the what you might see in a practice set or on an exam, how much are they more application based, or are they more how are they different from what you'll typically see in a typical calculus class in high school or any of
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So it kind of goes back to just what I said more generally about the difference between college and high school classes. But so if we were having linear algebra in person, the exam would be 40% conceptual, true, false, is this true, is this false, multiple choice, and maybe even 60% computation. So row reduce this matrix or take the derivative of this function. So that's much more weighted towards recipes. That's the way we used to do it. But then the virus happened, and our final exam for linear algebra was 100% true, false, multiple choice, meaning you weren't doing any taking derivatives or row reducing really. And so that's maybe scary for people, but it means you have to approach the material differently. It means you practice the kinds of questions that'll be on the exam. And we don't know what's going to happen in the fall. We might have some idea. But whatever, you should find out as early as possible what the questions will be like. And you want to ask your professor for practice questions and practice as much as you can the kinds of questions that'll be on the test.
Okay, perfect. Hi. First off, thank you for answering all of our questions. And second, I just wanted to ask, just going off of Archie's question, if we aren't exposed to these types of sometimes, always, never true, or these true and false types of questions beforehand, and usually in our textbooks we see that there are a lot of just computational based. Where do we find the practice to get really good at these questions that involve a lot of critical thinking?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a little bit hard. All calculus and linear algebra textbooks, they will have true, false, and short answer, at least most textbooks. So if yours doesn't, just find, you can find a used textbook that has that. Another place to look is I keep all of my old exams on my website. If you just click around, you have to go to the old courses and find the exams. So there's enough out there, Georgia Tech exams, that that's another place to go. We also have, so every semester we have practice exams, 1 or 2 practice exams, and then the exam. So there's, all of these classes, 1553 is now, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, something like that. There's a ton of, there should be enough there. There's also homework questions, or we use WebWork, which is some online homework system that has a lot of true false. So, yeah, so if you feel like you don't have enough, ask your professor, but there are places, but I agree with you. If you just look in the obvious places, you might not find it.
Got it. Thanks.
Oh, how large is the linear algebra? In the fall, it's 150. In the spring, it's 115. What do office hours look like? I love that question. It's not too different in person versus like doing this online stuff. But yeah, a lot of people don't even know what office hours are, and that's one reason they don't go. What it looks like for me is, and this is typical, I'll just be in my office, and am I going in the right order here? I'll just be in my office, the door is open, you knock on the door, and I'll say hi, and then you sit down, and then you can ask whatever you want. You can sit there hoping that other people have questions and you just want to listen, that's fine. You might have a homework question you couldn't do or you're having trouble with. You can ask, can you give me a hint on this question? You can say, I didn't understand that last thing you did in class today. Can we go over that again? Literally anything that could help you do better on the homework, exams, understanding the lecture better. If you just want to say hi, you can come and say hi. If you have a special concern like a learning disability, anything, you can make a special appointment for that. Or but if if you have a suggestion for how to make the class better, anything, they're open hours, they're open office hours. You can come and talk to me about anything. But mostly it's like answering homework questions. Can you explain how to do this one on the practice test? And then we go over it. Sometimes someone will want to get up and use the whiteboard, the marker themselves on the whiteboard. Sometimes I'll explain and give kind of a mini lecture. It's really just a conversation. But it gets taken such little advantage of. It's the best resource you have at Georgia Tech and in college in general is going to office hours because I'm making the exams, right? So you sort of learn how I think about things. And you get that one-on-one. Like I said, the big thing in math is try to say it out loud. Try to explain back what you think you understood or what you're trying to understand. And so it's a chance to have a conversation with a real life person, an expert on the topic. And because so few students take advantage of it, you get almost one-on-one tutoring if you come to a typical office hours. Maybe there'll be a few people there. It is the best use of your time in college. Oh, somebody else asked about, Calc 1 is just not at all used in linear algebra, basically. There's one lecture where I mention it very briefly, some calculus, but it also, you don't really need to, it's just kind of a side comment. So, so it is tough. A lot of people try to stick in Calc 1 and linear algebra in their first semester because they're both 2 credits. Again, don't think of them as 2 credits. It's going to be a lot. If you're nervous about math in general, I would try to do just 1. Or just get ready to put time. You can do it. It just takes time. But the difference, again, is I don't have much experience with IB, but certainly AP, you can do well on the AP test by learning all the recipes really, really well and learning all the tricks, like for doing integrals. In linear algebra, you have to understand the concepts, and I'll say a little bit more about that maybe in a minute.
What's your take on the difficulty of Georgia Tech math classes, particularly calculus and linear algebra, because there seems to be a general hard idea affiliated with them?
Yeah, I touched on that one a little bit earlier. I think they're hard, especially if you're expecting, I'm kind of maybe being like a broken record, but if you're expecting recipes, they're going to be hard. If you commit to, I'm going to learn these concepts, one of the hard things is maybe you don't know when you've learned the concept or not. You're used to like, okay, I can do the recipe. Like either you know the recipe or you don't. How do you know when you've learned the concept? Again, that comes, the best way is to go to office hours, talk to a real life person and say, I think I understand this from class. Can I try to explain it to you? That's really the best way. And maybe after a while you don't need the office hours anymore. But that's the hard thing, is you don't even know maybe what it means to like exactly learn an abstract math concept when you're first starting college. That's the hardest thing about it, I think. Oh, would it be better to take Calc 2 or linear algebra first? Great question. I would probably do Calc 2 first. If you're used, just because you're familiar with calculus, Calc 2, the difference between Calc 2 and like your high school class, it's not super different. It's really more linear algebra. It's like a real college level class where you have to understand the concepts. So if you're like just coming into Georgia Tech, Calc 2 it's not an easy class by any means, but it's more familiar and you kind of know the drill. In linear algebra, you just don't know the drill. It's like you have to like learn a new way of learning, really. So that's a general advice. There's no reason to jump into linear algebra right away. I mean, it's a great class, but I think if you've taken calculus before, Calc 2 will be sort of easier on you.
So we're going to ask a couple more that have been sitting in here. So is it possible to sell it math muscle memory? I know this was touched upon a little bit. You could maybe expand upon it.
Yeah, the answer is no. The answer is no. That's basically what I keep talking about, recipes, and it's just not that. It's you know, if you know, a lot of you have taken calculus, right? Maybe you know what a continuous function is, you know, and what you might have to do is like, there's no formula for checking if a function is continuous, right? You have to kind of understand the concept. And when you see a picture and you see a break in the function, you kind of, it looks not continuous. But there's no recipe for that. You kind of, you know, you have to look at it and have some understanding. And so linear algebra especially is a lot like that. You have to, I think that's a good example. You have to like understand the concept of continuous to just be able to see that that's not continuous. It's not really a formula. Oh, now do we all make our own tests? So I kind of lied a little bit. I do make the exams, but in the coordinated classes, which the homeworks are common. The midterms generally are not common, but they're similar, and the final is usually common. So certainly for the midterms, at least in the past, I made the one for my class. And the final was kind of, you know, we all had to kind of agree, and if there was some topic that one of us covered, another one didn't, we just wouldn't cover it on the final. But the exams are usually, and the homeworks are common, and the exams are professor by professor, although, you know, maybe with the virus situation, we might have more common exams. So good question. Let's see, is there a specific online platform? Yeah, the homework is something called web work. It's not out of the textbooks. Web work is kind of like the open source, free. So what's good about linear algebra is we use a textbook that I wrote with Joe Rabinoff, which is free. It has great demos in it, which are really useful. And we wrote our own homework. We didn't write the homework system, but it's a free homework system. And so some people don't like our online homework system because some of the fancier ones, they like show you a problem that's, you know, if you get stuck, it'll show you a problem that's like exactly the same except with different numbers, and then you just have to follow the steps. Ours doesn't do that. We want you to get stuck and think about things sometimes. But it's called web work. That's the homework system. Do most people manage to test out of Calc 2 linear algebra taking the placement test? I don't know. I'm not the person to ask about that. I don't know what percentage of people pass. I have no idea. So there's the place to ask would be advising@math.gottech.edu. So that's all I can say about that. Sorry.
Dr. Margalit, while we're waiting, we did have a question about writing proofs. I'm not sure if you got to that one.
Yeah, I mentioned, yeah, you'll never write a proof, I don't think, really, in any of these first-year math classes. But, you know, to understand you might want to understand the proofs that are in the book, or at least some of them. That would help you a lot to understand what's going on. Oh, is the different types of learners thing nonsense? Great question. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. It's certainly, I wouldn't say it's nonsense. I guess by more mean I'm not an expert. Visual learners, auditory learners, does have merit? Yeah, it's a great question. It's maybe out of my expertise. I don't really know if there really are different kind of learners. Some people will say that there are, and some people will say that there aren't. I For me, I think I tend to believe in it a little bit. I think everyone's brain works differently, and for me, drawing a picture, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and for me, learning math, having a picture is the best thing, and maybe for me, listening is maybe a little bit harder because you have to like convert the stuff coming in into like something in your head, and it's a different way. I don't know. If you should just experiment with yourself. If like in class, like when the professor draws a picture, that's like what makes it click, then you should ask, is there a picture you can draw for that concept you just explained? But it maybe is irrelevant whether there is such a thing as a visual learner. You should, for each concept, ask questions until you feel like you understand it.
To go off of your response with that, we had another ask a question that kind of goes hand in hand with Neil's question. So Ashley stated she struggled with technical critical thinking through education because of a sequency learning disorder. So what's your advice for someone needing resources that allow them to learn at maybe slower pace or with different types of, or for different types of learners, particularly math?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know anything about sequence learning disorder, so I won't even touch on that. So sorry about that. But yeah, I mentioned earlier I guess the thing is, I believe in every student at Georgia Tech. They can learn the stuff. It's always easy to feel like other people are going faster than you. It's usually not the case. But I would say just get the help you need. There's office hours for the professor and the TA. There's plus session. If you know what plus is, it's just another kind of TA that's run by a different group. I guess it's a Center for Academic Success, maybe. So find, a study group, just any place where you can spend time going through the material. But take advantage of the office hours and the plus sessions. And I keep repeating, but like find ways where you can be active and saying what's on your head. It doesn't help to have people re-say the same sentences over and over and hope you understand them better. You have to say, I think I understand it. Is this how it works? And that's when the learning happens. So I would do that as much as possible. Yeah, plus sessions are great. Experience with teaching and grading online. Again, the biggest thing, and it's a little bit of a bummer, we used to give more questions on the exams that were, do this recipe, and we just can't give those anymore because we're not proctoring in any way. It's way too easy to just ask Google to row reduce the matrix for you. So that was the biggest change. The exams had to be all things that were hard to Google or that your computer couldn't just immediately do. But as far as teaching, honestly, it wasn't that different. I like seeing people. It's great to be in the same room as people. But honestly, it's not that different. When I teach, I'm given a lecture, there's slides, I'm writing on the slides with my iPad, I'm answering questions. And online, I was doing the exact same thing. I had the slides on my iPad, I was writing on them. People were asking questions in the chat, just like we're doing now. It's honestly, I shouldn't say it too loudly because maybe they'll just like get rid of the campus, but, it honestly isn't that different. For some people, I think it helps to be in person, like you have to get out of bed and maybe that's hard. And also, I think it's easier if I can make eye contact, I can see if people are confused versus like, maybe they're just sitting back and not asking questions. So you have to be more like assertive about being active during class. But the mechanics aren't that different. And now whether people who had their high school in other country, for example, Russia, have had a hard time adapting, covering the various gaps due to differences in education standards. I don't know. I would say, for the most part, people from other countries are pretty well off compared, I don't know, but, just who knows. But I don't think I've seen a disadvantage to people coming from other countries. I think especially linear algebra, most people don't have background in it, and it just everybody's sort of starting in the same place. So I wouldn't worry so much coming from another country um, as far as that. I think I answered the thing about the online platform, if someone can delete that. How do the ideas and problem-solving strategies from inter-level classes translate to subjects such as topology manifolds? Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too into it because this is for a general audience, but if in linear algebra, if you follow along with the proofs, you're really getting a lot of preparation for the upper level classes. And if you're interested in proofs, there is a linear algebra class that's for people who want to be math majors. You might want to consider taking that. That would be even better preparation for those other subjects you're mentioning, Archie. Are some people better at math? Great question, Neil. I love this question. I even talked about that in these slides, which I guess I'll share. You'll just read them later. I don't think there's a huge, I think there are a very small number of people who are math geniuses or just geniuses in general. For the most part, 99% of us were all kind of roughly similar. I think a mistake is you think especially if someone else has more background in a certain topic, you might ascribe to them that they're a genius or think they're smarter or faster than you. But just looking around at Georgia Tech students, almost all of us, including myself, are just in this general group of people who are smart people. And it's a big mistake that a lot of my students make because they think they're not going to be good enough or smart enough. And it's just not true. Everybody who's at Georgia Tech can do well in these classes, but you have to put the work in. You have to go to office hours. If you get behind, you have to catch yourself. But I really, really believe that everybody who walks in my door can do well. It does take time and work. Is there a ceiling for some people? I just see it over and over. People, including myself, when I started graduate school, I was behind everybody else. I was a class of 27, and the grad director basically told me I was the worst out of the 27. And math, math is a long road, even within one semester. It's the learning and studying day after day, and it just adds up. And I don't think there are some people in my class who cannot get an A. I just don't believe that. Everybody's got to spend time. Yeah, but no, that's maybe a good note to kind of end on is if you're at Georgia Tech, you absolutely can do it. If you feel yourself getting behind, then get help. But do not feel like it's something that that you can't do. How do you spend long hours? Oh, I have no idea what the Pomodoro technique is, but here's something that I didn't touch on at all yet that I should say is you don't have to spend long hours, first of all. Unironically. So I want to say two things. One is I just read this book called Deep Work, which is just about just getting into the mindset where you're really focusing. I know we live in a new world but not that new anymore with technology. The best thing you can do for learning is to put the technology away. Every time you get a ping from your phone, or even having your phone out and having it light up or whatever, then you turn away from the math you're doing. So give yourself, even if it's a half an hour, put the phone on Do Not Disturb and just do your math homework. And it doesn't have to be hours and hours and hours a day. Let's say, if you're taking linear algebra, 1 hour of not doing your phone or your computer or anything, and you're just studying that day's material. That's all you need to do. Link to the PowerPoint. I wonder if I could, would it be the best thing to just paste it in right here? So Neil answered Lily's question about 1554 is twice as much material. It meets 3 times a week, so I guess it's 1.5 times as much material. Depending on your major, some majors will require 1554. And Neil, people who said trust the math and people who said learn the intuition first. I don't know. To use both. The most important thing is kind of get the feel for things. In my advice that I sent out the link to is you should play with the math. there are demo. Our book has demos that you can play with, and try like changing the parameters. What happens if I do this? What happens if I change the parameters like that? That's the thing. You want to take the math and kind of, don't just like learn the list of rules, learn the list of things that the professor said in class. That won't be good enough. You want to try to get some understanding, and you can do that by playing with the demo. The analogy that I gave in the notes that I sent out were like, if you're thinking about how do you get from your dorm room to class, you don't memorize like the list of all possible routes, and then if there's construction in the middle, you do a different thing on the list. You kind of have some understanding of how the campus works and where the campanile is and where the clef is, and you kind of use that understanding if there's a problem you need to solve.
I think there are questions, but do you have any last minute advice for our students this summer on how to succeed?
Just try to have a good attitude about math. It is interesting. There are people like me who spend their entire life doing math. Doesn't mean every math teacher you've ever had and every math class you've ever taken has been like the most exciting thing, but it is an interesting subject. And I see every semester students are like, wow, this is really amazing. I also see students who are just like, oh, why am I doing this? This totally sucks. This totally sucks. Try at least for a little bit. Try not to think that it totally sucks, and try to like nag the professor, why is this interesting exactly? And they should be able to inspire you in some way. But math is beautiful. It's used in every other subject you're gonna study at Georgia Tech. So an attitude will make a huge difference. But the other thing to remember is that is easily forgotten is that just everybody who's at Georgia Tech can do well in these classes. It does take work, and correct yourself very early in the semester if you realize you're not getting the material. And go to office hours. So yeah, go for it, as Christina says. Yeah, but good luck everybody. It's been fun chatting. Thanks for all the great questions. And hopefully I'll meet some of you in my class in the fall. But yeah, if you see me around, do say hi. I'm always happy to meet new Yellow Jackets.